On this Saturday night, the vaccine frenzy. From pop-up clinics to pharmacies, there's no shortage of demand in Ontario.
It's been crazy. I think the entire supply should be gone by today.
But will this stop a fourth wave? Internal Affairs, the spotlight on who's investigating sexual misconduct in Canada's military. The plunge to Earth, the rocket reentry, but no one's sure where it will land. Plus, the rise of Dogecoin, the cryptocurrency stealing the spotlight.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin in Ontario tonight, where the provincial government has quietly expanded its COVID-19 vaccination campaign to include people as young as 18. With more Ontarians now eligible to get the shot, there is no shortage of demand. As Global's Kamil Karamali is here to tell us, there's a frenzy to get vaccinated. Kamil?
Robin, dozens of pharmacies in some of the hardest hit neighborhoods across Ontario now offering Pfizer and Moderna to those who are 18 and older. But once again, the problem comes down to supply.
All right, my dear.
The past 24 hours has been a whirlwind of vaccinations at this pharmacy in Toronto's West End.
We're in the middle of a very, very hot spot in terms of COVID.
The province expanded vaccine eligibility to people 18 plus at pharmacies in the more than 100 COVID hotspots across Ontario.
Ready? Yep, absolutely.
Barpur Singh Sachdeva is 30 years old and is finally getting his jab.
It's very good. It's like an amazing system over here.
Sachdeva is one of the lucky few. Half of this pharmacy's doses were used up Friday.
It's been crazy. I think the entire supply should be gone by today.
Ontario announced this week it's expanding its vaccination efforts in hard-hit neighborhoods in Toronto and Peel. 78 pharmacies are now able to give shots to those 18 and older. The program is also expanding to include up to 60 pharmacies in 5 other regions of the province. Each one will only receive up to 150 doses a week.
So that's not going to last long. Each pharmacy utilizes its own booking system or call-in, or in some circumstances where it's appropriate, we offer walk-ins.
Pharmacies aren't the only places seeing a surge in vaccine demand.
We've got a long line, but it's moving quite quickly.
Many of these people had booked appointments at city-run clinics for later in the month through the province's website, signing up for 2, 3, even 4 dates at once. Even then, some having all of their appointments fall through.
I was waiting for my appointment and I didn't get it, so I said it's best for me to come and try get it today.
But then a mad dash.
It was actually super hard to find.
All of that scheduling out the window as a pop-up clinic arrives in their neighborhood.
It's just a matter of getting up and searching every morning.
Vaccine eligibility is also expanding consistently. This pop-up clinic is specifically for members of the Black community.
It's pop-up and information, because we know that for many members of the Black community, there is still some hesitancy.
Now, the Ontario Pharmacists Association says the goal is to expand this 18-plus program to all 1,400 pharmacies across Ontario as early as June. Robin?
Kamil Karamali in Toronto. Thanks, Kamil. 2 provinces with soaring COVID-19 cases are bringing in new restrictions. Starting tomorrow morning, Manitoba is capping outdoor gatherings to 5 people. Gyms, libraries, and salons will be closed. There will be no indoor dining at restaurants and bars. The province is struggling to deal with the surge in COVID-19 cases. Today, it recorded 488 new infections. Nova Scotia is bringing in new restrictions. Households must now designate one person to do essential shopping, and starting Monday, the province is closing its boundaries to all non-essential travel. Schools will remain closed until at least the end of the month. Alberta is the country's COVID-19 hotspot. It has the highest rate of active cases in Canada and the United States. The province has increased restrictions, including limiting outdoor gatherings to 5 people, moving students to online learning, and increasing fines for people who break the rules. Despite that, anti-lockdown protests continue. On this weekend's edition of the West Block, Abigail Bimman speaks with Calgary's mayor about the situation in Alberta. Abigail.
Robin, Mayor Nahid Nenshi told the West Block he believes this is not the time for politics or figuring out who's to blame, but rather to focus on flattening the curve. And he took issue with this description of Alberta protesters from Conservative MP Michelle Rempel-Garner in an emergency debate in the House Wednesday night.
People need to eat. So it's very paternalistic to suggest that people who might not be following restrictions are doing so from a place of just sort of like bourgeois contempt for the law.
Those people at those anti-mask protests, let's not kid ourselves, they're not people who need to eat. They are people who are marching in thinly veiled white nationalist, supremacist, anti-government protests, and they don't deserve that kind of sympathy.
After an 11-year term, Nenshi has announced he won't be running for his mayoral seat again, so we asked him what's next.
I have no idea. I know that when I'm finished this job in about 6 months, I have a long to-do list, but when I'm finished in about 6 months, I will find a way to serve. That's in my blood, but probably outside of elected office for now.
You can catch the full interview with Mayor Nenshi as well as a wide-ranging conversation with Intergovernmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc on Alberta, military misconduct and long-term care, Sunday on the West Block. Robin?
Abigail Bimman in Ottawa. Looking forward to it. The global epicenter of the pandemic is still India, and the situation there is just getting worse. Today, the country is reporting more than 400,000 new cases and a record high 4,187 deaths. International aid is now arriving in India. This Canadian military plane landed in Delhi today, carrying 25,000 vials of the antiviral drug remdesivir, along with 50 ventilators. This week, Canada became the first nation to pledge money to a new COVID-19 fund that aims to provide poorer countries life-saving medical supplies. As Redmond Shannon explains, there's growing concern the desperate oxygen shortage in India could happen in other developing countries.
No matter how much aid arrives, it is just not enough. In India, these patients are the lucky ones. Many are stuck outside the hospital doors. Thousands more likely dying in their homes. The black market price of oxygen far out of reach. What's worrying many experts is that other countries, particularly in Africa, have far weaker healthcare systems than India.
We as a continent must be very, very prepared. Prepared to that the same scenario that is happening in India can eventually happen on the continent.
The head of the Africa Centres for Disease Control says as vaccine exports from India dry up, face masks are the only protection Africa has for now. And he is appealing to governments not to make the same mistakes as India, like holding political rallies.
Do not have a mass gathering. They will promote the opportunity for the virus to replicate, and we'll find ourselves in where India is. And we cannot and should not find ourselves in that scenario because of the very fragile nature of our health system.
One of Africa's richer nations, Tunisia, has an infection rate well below that of India, but its healthcare system has struggled to keep up.
And if COVID can wreak this havoc in a major city in India, I don't want to think what it could do in Lagos, Nigeria, or Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Leith Greenslade coordinates the Every Breath Counts coalition. The group says billions of dollars are needed to get the developing world oxygen ready.
Our estimates suggest this could happen in 40 more countries. So we have to get ahead of that and be ready as an international group of agencies to respond very quickly.
The coalition wants the G7 nations, including Canada, to provide $240 million immediately. On Wednesday, Canada alone pledged $230 million to another UNICEF fund that will help supply oxygen and therapeutics where they're needed most. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
A Global News investigation has found complaints of sexual misconduct in the military will likely be investigated by men. Less than a quarter of those who lead these probes are women. As David Aiken reports, this is yet another gender imbalance that the Canadian Armed Forces must address.
Army Major Kelly Brennan was one of the first women to come forward to disclose her experience as a victim of inappropriate sexual misconduct in Canada's military.
I'm just one woman who has served in the infantry for the last 30 years, since 1991, and give voice to all the women who need to speak up.
The military took her allegations seriously enough that they sent 3 investigators to her home.
I was interviewed for 2 entire days, 6 hours each.
All those investigators were men, no women. And when the investigators were done, she was referred to a military counselor for support, who was also a man.
I was not going to enjoy having to explain myself to another male.
It was the same with aviation technician Emily Tulloch. When she complained of sexual misconduct and rape, her investigators were men.
During these interviews, I felt investigators were not treating me like a human being, but just another case file to them. There was no empathy or humanity.
These are not isolated incidents. A Global News investigation has learned that just 23% of the military investigators who handle sexual misconduct complaints are women. That is in sharp contrast to the ratio on many civilian police forces, where, for example, 45% of investigators are women in Toronto, 50% are women in Vancouver, and 67% in Ottawa are women.
The situation in the Canadian Armed Forces right now is unacceptable. It is very clear that women and men who are victims of assault or harassment are not comfortable in coming forward.
Not one, but 2 parliamentary committees are investigating how the Canadian Forces deals with sexual misconduct, and their recommendations are expected this month. David Aiken, Global News, Ottawa.
Coming up, young female students are the victims of an attack in Afghanistan. Clashes erupted between Palestinian worshippers and Israeli police at a mosque compound in Jerusalem that is sacred to both Jews and Muslims. At least 200 people were injured. Since the beginning of Ramadan, there have been nightly protests, some of the worst unrest seen in years, and there are fears there will be more violence. Israel has been clamping down on religious gatherings and threatening to evict dozens of Palestinians who live in East Jerusalem. Afghanistan is on edge tonight. Bomb blasts near a school in the capital, Kabul, have killed at least 55 people. Dozens of others are injured. Afghanistan's interior minister says many of the victims are female students. Witnesses say a car bomb exploded first before 2 other explosions near the school. The government says the Taliban is stepping up attacks after the U.S. announced plans to pull out its troops by September 11th. China's arrests of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig are largely seen as retaliation for Canada's detention of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou at the request of the United States. The case has put a spotlight on the thousands of political prisoners being held by the communist government. Our Jeff Semple has the story of one American fighting to free them. Jeff.
Well, Robin, more than 100 Canadians are currently detained inside China. Their alleged crimes range from fraud and drug trafficking charges to espionage. Many of them are dual nationals, Chinese-Canadian citizens who have largely been forgotten by this country. But there is still one lifeline whom they can call. John Kam might seem an unlikely champion for Chinese prisoners. 30 years ago, the American businessman, former chemical salesman, was also the president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong. And at that time, the Chinese government wanted Kam's help, lobbying Washington to help upgrade their trading status. Now, Kam agreed on one condition. He'd heard the sad story of this student from Hong Kong who'd been arrested at Tiananmen Square, and Kam asked that student be released. Well, the Chinese agreed, and Kam never looked back. He has spent the past 30 years fighting to free political prisoners inside China. His nonprofit maintains the world's largest database of Chinese political prisoners, past and present, containing more than 45,000 names. Kam works patiently within the confines of China's opaque judicial system, formally submitting prisoner lists. His tone is constructive, complimentary, very respectful, and he has had success over the years. Kam has helped to secure clemency for hundreds of prisoners.
When the relationship between the U.S. and China and Canada and other countries are good, then my work is easier. When the relationships are not good, then my work is more difficult. It's a bit difficult, more than a bit difficult these days.
Indeed, over the past 2 or 3 years, Cam says his legal victories have become increasingly rare and that the pandemic has made his work even harder. But over the years, governments right around the world have sought Cam's advice and guidance in dealing with China's judicial system, including Canada. And coming up tonight on The New Reality, we'll bring you the story of one Canadian prisoner who has been detained in China for 15 years. And we'll tell you why Cam believes that the coming months might provide a rare moment to finally secure his release. Robin?
Jeff Semple in Toronto. Thanks, Jeff. Still ahead, how a spoof on Bitcoin is creating investor hype.
You're watching Global National.
Oh my God, look at this. I can't believe they're giving me my own late night show.
After 2 seasons, time's up for A Little Late with Lilly Singh. The Canadian who caught the eye of NBC executives with her YouTube sketch comedies is pulling the plug on her nightly show. It debuted in 2019 as the first late show hosted by a woman of color. Singh, who is of Indian descent and bisexual, announced she's excited about bringing even more diversity to screen in an even bigger way. Projects with Netflix and NBC Universal are already in the works. By now, you're probably familiar with Bitcoin, but another cryptocurrency which started out as a spoof is on a tear. Dogecoin has become a go-to asset for investors. And adding to the hype, Tesla founder Elon Musk. He hosts Saturday Night Live tonight, and there's speculation he could say something to pump up the price. Our national business correspondent Ann Gaviola reports on what started out as a joke, now soaring to mind-numbing heights.
It started as a joke. Dogecoin was created by a couple of engineers in 2013 as a parody of Bitcoin and a way to immortalize a doggone cute Shiba Inu through internet memes. That joke caught on like wildfire with Reddit users, propelling its total value to $8 million within months. Doge, as it's known, has become a go-to for tipping online, used to reward people around the world for good deeds or an interesting idea. And the price of Dogecoin has soared during the pandemic, driven even higher by scores of young traders embracing meme culture. Many factors behind a hot stock market have found their way into digital assets, too. If you had invested $100 in Dogecoin a year ago, it would be worth about $30,000 today.
Doge really represents everything that I love about the cryptocurrency world.
Cryptocurrency enthusiast Jenna Pilgrim first bought into Doge in 2018.
It is anti-establishment, it's unorganized, the narratives aren't clear, it has no real backing to it, it has an infinite supply, and it doesn't pretend to be anything that it's not.
The total value of Dogecoin is more than $77 billion US. That's more than the total stock market value of some really big names, including Lyft, H&R Block, and even Harley-Davidson. Its skyrocketing price puts it at the number 4 spot among cryptocurrencies, only behind Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Binance Coin.
It's really hard to assign what a fair valuation is for any of these things. And we've seen, I think in recent times, retail investors take a hold and get behind various assets that we're not used to in the traditional markets. You saw this play out a couple months ago with GameStop.
In a year when memes and trending topics on social media influence the price of stocks such as GameStop, Dogecoin has gotten in on the action too. This week, the anticipation ahead of Elon Musk's hosting of Saturday Night Live has lifted Doge to new heights.
Elon Musk in particular likes to challenge the conventional way that people look at things. And he's done that with money.
Is it a bubble? Yes. I would never suggest that anyone invest their life savings in Doge. Never invest anything that you are not prepared to lose.
Ann Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Up next, China's rocket is about to land on Earth, but no one is quite sure where. A huge and out-of-control Chinese rocket is hurtling back to Earth. Space agencies and military experts around the world are busy tracking its path. The rocket, one of the biggest and heaviest in China's fleet, is expected to crash land somewhere in the southern Pacific Ocean after midnight. But as Jennifer Johnson reports, no one really knows where.
Late last month, a massive Chinese rocket was launched, making a delivery to the Chinese space station under construction. But now a massive piece of that rocket, 32 meters long, is hurtling toward Earth at about 29,000 kilometers per hour. The unit, which you can see flashing in sunlight as it tumbles, is breaking apart, but
you will get a bunch of maybe a couple 100-pound objects slamming into the Earth. And so you don't want to be standing in the way of one of those.
This piece of the rocket is one of the biggest objects to ever make re-entry. 70% of the Earth's surface is water, so odds are that's where the big chunks will land. But there are no guarantees. The U.S. military is tracking the out-of-control descent.
We don't have a plan to shoot the rocket down. We're hopeful that it will land in a place where it won't harm anyone.
Chinese officials are claiming the pieces will fall into international waters and dismissing criticism as Western media hype. But a year ago, another Chinese booster is believed to have struck this village in West Africa's Ivory Coast. China has traditionally shown little concern about its space debris hitting Earth.
Most space agencies, they have a plan in place. They retain control of that booster so that they can control when it enters the Earth's atmosphere and where it's going to land. Unfortunately, the Chinese space agency is not doing that.
Fortunately, experts say Canada does not appear to be at risk of being hit, and they say others shouldn't be all that worried either.
Chances of you getting hurt by something like this are extremely small. And if something is going to happen, there's nothing that you can do about it. So just like anything, go about your day. Don't worry about it.
Trackers say they will have a couple of hours warning before the first pieces hit Earth, enough time to give people a heads up if those chunks veer toward populated areas. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Keep an eye on that sky. That is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is the Walterdale Bridge in Edmonton. We would love to see your corner of the country, so please keep sending your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Good night.